Previously on the Seventh Valkyrie, the united forces of the Old City, the Machine King, and the Four Families prepare to sweep into the Edaran New City. Is there anyone left who can stand in their way? Find out next on the Seventh Valkyrie.
Welcome to try. Just kill the Edaran's first, love, and our deal still stands. He set off towards the center of the barge, cloak swirling behind him in the breeze as he strode between his shifting phantom soldiers and stood to face the family battle line. Mere feet away, 4 phalanxes were alight, ready to incinerate, freeze dry, spear, drown, suffocate, and bury him with every element all at once. Scanning the lines of warriors first, and then the speakers of the families behind them, Krona nodded and raised his voice to speak. You may hate me, but you already did. You may want me dead, but that was your plan all along. You may not trust me, but you never did in the first place. The families eyed him uneasily. I owe no allegiance to you, your pact, your city, or your people. But we had a deal, and now I'm inclined to hold up my end if you return the same courtesy. He gestured back towards BC. The nightmare stands to face Edera, fueled by the same hate that you hold in your hearts. The Machine King stands alongside her. What will you do? Are you willing to take back your lands with the same bravery and bluster that you showed behind closed doors? His eyes flicked between each of the family leaders. Or will you run back to your holes and hide from now until the very last squirming child is slaughtered or broken like cattle? It was no less than an open challenge to the family's honor, their power, and their defiance, and in that moment, the 4 speakers knew that they had played this whole situation right into Krona's hands. But sometimes in war, you had to take the gifts an enemy offered you. Sure, he had backed them into a corner, but he had paved the way out with shining cobblestone and red carpet. First, the 3 flames stood and raised their blades. Then came the Golden Serpent. After them, the Seekers of Dawn, and finally the Ravens of Dusk, whose impassive speaker rose and spoke. For what you have done, when the sun rises, you will be our enemy again, Krona. From then on, until our last warrior falls. But while the night is dark, you may share in the spilling of Edaran blood. Tonight we reclaim what is ours. Raise the call! The cry of war erupted from the Freelander warriors across the barge, then spread across the bay, and then the drums began to echo, a quickening beat to raise an army who would bring an end to the new city. Around BC, memories started flickering by again, violent ones and beautiful ones all blurring together as the bells began to ring out in the new city. But then, reaching out for that perfect, violent, unstoppable simplicity, the bells began to fade, and she embraced oblivion once more, boarding a wave runner helmed by Krona's men and headed straight for the new city. Meridia. Armor was not light. In fact, if the She-Fox armor hadn't been designed specifically to be light, Meridia might have ended up on the ocean floor before she got it off. As it was, by the time she loosened the chest piece and greaves enough to slip out, she was only about 80 feet below the surface. But rather than swimming straight up, Meridia angled her ascent away from the barge, away from that metallic gaze, and away from the stroke of crushing black thwarp magic that had cut across their entire formation. Whatever that dark power was, it made almost the entirety of Edaran warfare obsolete. As Meridia paddled upwards, her spine tingled like she was being watched, and despite her screaming lungs, Meridia slowed down, broke the surface in silence, and managed to exhale slowly and gently. Then she sucked in sweet, fresh air with the same caution, and only when she had snatched in a few breaths of sweet oxygen through pursed lips did she crack an eye and survey the water around her. Drums and horns and bells and cries of war filled the air as the battle lines clashed, neither side giving up territory. But then a shining flare lit up the night, sending Meridia fleeing below the surface. When the flare had faded and the sky had gone dark, Meridia reemerged, finding the Edaran lines broken into chaos and the thwarps descending upon them. Swearing, Meridia dove down again and stayed below the water, trying to wrap her head around the situation and assess her next move. The thwarps were pushing, the Edaran formation was broken, and the Edaran High Command had been wiped out. Or, had they? Rising slowly from the water, Meridia glanced to the barge where smoke and steam rose over the rubble, all that remained of the Edaran delegation and their side of the barge, torn apart by that devastating sneak attack. There was no way anyone could have survived that, so it was perfectly reasonable to assume that everyone was dead. Meridia treaded water for 3 more strokes, and then with a deep breath, she dove back beneath the surface and set off with a pulsing stroke, making her way towards the barge through the dark, murky depths. It was her duty to protect the officers, and until she had confirmed them dead, she would honor that. The water grew black and thick as Meridia surfaced again, this time in the shadow of the barge, a dozen yards from the burning rubble cut across by the stroke of midnight. This was fucking stupid. Above the sounds of war, it was nearly impossible to tell if anyone was standing nearby or looking at her. But that clamor would also hide the sounds as she surfaced and provide a distraction. Fuck. If anyone was on that barge looking, they'd see her clear as day, but the war was raging, and from Meridia's vantage point, she couldn't spot anybody. Double fuck. Meridia dove down, grabbed the side of the barge's pontoons, and pulled herself along the underside of the barge, before eventually diving down, feeling her way past a crumbling support strut, and finally surfacing through hot, sticky water into the remains of the Edaran forces. There were bubbles and chunks and bodies still twitching or faces just submerged beneath the surface. And as Meridia rose from the water, she felt the sporadic heat of oozing viscera sliding down her face, immediately followed by chunks of ice and stone. Something grabbed at her foot, and Meridia kicked once, but then the presence lay still and faded into the black water. As she breathed deep, the air above the water stank, the smell of organs and emptied bowels, and Meridia gritted her teeth, clinging to the pontoon and pulling up to try to scan the area. Yosin hadn't been wearing heavy armor, or any armor at all, so he would float, the arrogant prick. But there were more body parts than bodies floating in the black water, and it was only through the luck of the devil that Meridia spotted a wispy white beard on her third nightmare dive to check all of the remains. She'd found Yosin. Or rather, half of Yosin. He had been severed cleanly in 2 at the waist, but whether through perseverance or sheer disbelief, the old bastard was still alive. He gasped and reached out for her as she grasped his waist, pulling him into the shadow of the barge where she treaded water to keep them both afloat. He was spitting and coughing until she stabilized him with a hand over his mouth, hushing him. When he finally turned his head to see her, he coughed again, letting out a gentle whimper. Meridia. I'm dying, Meridia. I can't feel anything. I'm going to be with the Iron Wolf now. Shh, sir. Yes, your watch is nearly ended, but before that happens, She'd been intending to ask him for his final orders, which was protocol, but instead, he reached up and stroked her hair. You were always so precious in your attempts to play soldier. I admired you for it, in the way you admire a bug fighting against a lizard. But won't you be useful for once in your life and do me this final task?
He descended into a weak coughing fit, stifled by Meridia's hands, while Meridia's eyebrows became a part of her hairline. Eventually, Yosin's coughing fit subsided, and he looked at her with glassy eyes.
If everything I taught you, everything I shaped you into, leads to one thing, let it be this. Carry on the tale and the legacy of Yosin, High Commander and hero of Edaran. Spread the story, girl, of my bravery, my loyalty, my heroism. Don't you see? You can leave this playing soldier behind and serve a higher purpose. Won't you rise to the challenge for this final task, girl?
Meridia cradled Yosin, holding him gently, with his head to her chest. Her breathing was irregular, her chest shaking. Commander. His response came like he was already far away.
Yes, child.
You must be fucking hysterical, you stupid fucking prick. Edaran will know your betrayal. They will grieve your failure, and I will never again speak your name. She spat in his face, and as his expression twisted into rage, she pushed him to arm's length and let him sink into the water, struggling and burbling with weak arms as he slipped beneath the surface. Covered in the viscera of her comrades spilled by his schemes and surrounded by organs and stench, Meridia stared into his angry, then pleading, then panicking, then dead eyes as he sank beneath the waves. With only a moment to catch her breath, Meridia dove back beneath the water then, blood and filth streaming off of her as she swam away from the barge and into the bay aflame with Old City fire. The new city might burn tonight, but Meridia could make sure it didn't go without a fight. Hey there! If you're hearing this, it means you're listening to the public version of this episode. I appreciate you taking the time and your interest in the series. It really helps the algorithm, it helps us grow. But if you are enjoying the show, maybe take a look over at our Patreon. We have uncut versions of the early episodes, access to new chapters before they're released for the general public, and you can shape the future of the series by deciding on new merch drops, bonus content, and more. You can get started for free at patreon.com/Seventh Valkyrie. That's patreon.com/7THVALKYRIE. Hope to see you there.